The ringing wouldn't stop. Captain Elena Mercer's eyes snapped open to blood-soaked goggles. 200 pounds of dead weight pinned her chest. Corporal Hassan, their gunner, lifeless eyes staring through her. Around them, the Humvee column burned. Boots crunched on gravel. Voices in Pashto. They were checking bodies. Double-tap executions, 2 rounds to the skull. Her M4 lay 3 feet away, barrel twisted. Left leg, no feeling. 90 seconds before they reached her. Then the radio crackled. "Alpha 1, come in." Sergeant Caldwell's transponder, still transmitting from his corpse. The Taliban fighter nearest her froze, head snapping toward the sound. He walked toward it, toward her. Elena's hand moved before her brain caught up. The combat knife strapped to Corporal Hassan's vest. She could just reach it. Fingers slick with blood, she worked the retention strap free. The Talib was 6 feet away now, AK-47 slung casual across his chest, flashlight sweeping the wreckage. He hadn't seen her yet. The darkness helped. So did the smoke. She gripped the knife handle, feeling the familiar crosshatch pattern against her palm. Her legs screamed as she shifted weight, but she kept her breathing shallow, controlled. The way Caldwell had taught her during SEER school. "Pain is just information," he'd said. "Your job is to ignore the message." The fighter bent over Caldwell's body, reaching for the radio. His back was to her now. 3 feet. Elena could smell him. Sweat, cordite, the sharp tang of adrenaline. She exploded upward. The knife went into the soft tissue below his jaw, angled up toward the brainstem. He didn't scream, couldn't scream, just made a wet, choking sound as she drove him sideways into the dirt. She held the blade there, counting heartbeats. His legs kicked twice, then stopped. Elena yanked the knife free and rolled, grabbing his AK. Her ears were still ringing from the blast, but she could hear shouts now, coming closer. The rest of his squad had heard something. She had maybe 30 seconds. The Korengal Valley at night was a special kind of hell. No moon, just jagged rocks and a wind that cut through body armor like it wasn't there. Elena low-crawled away from the kill site, dragging her useless left leg behind her. Every meter felt like a mile. Behind her, flashlights danced across the wreckage. More voices now, angry, urgent. They'd found their dead fighter. She heard the unmistakable sound of bolts being racked, search pattern forming up. She reached a dried riverbed and rolled into it, biting down on her sleeve to keep from crying out. The leg wasn't just numb anymore, it was swelling. Probably a fracture, definitely nerve damage. Her tactical vest still had 3 magazines, 14 rounds left in the AK she'd taken, 1 fragmentation grenade. The knife, now sticky with blood. Not enough, not nearly enough. She keyed the dead fighter's radio, listening. Taliban chatter, too fast for her limited Pashto. But she caught 2 words that made her blood freeze. American woman. They knew she was alive. They knew what she was, which meant they'd hunt her differently now. 18 hours earlier. "This smells wrong, Captain." Master Sergeant Frank Caldwell stood at the back of the briefing tent, arms crossed. At 52, he was the oldest man in Alpha Company, and the smartest. 2 tours in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan. The kind of soldier who'd forgotten more about mountain warfare than most officers would ever learn. Elena had looked up from her intelligence summary, irritated. "The HUMINT is solid, Sergeant. 3 separate sources confirm HVT movement through the valley." 3 sources. Caldwell's voice was flat. All from the same district governor's office. The same governor who's been skimming SERP funds for 6 months. That's a separate investigation. Is it? Caldwell had stepped forward then, lowering his voice. "Ma'am, I'm not questioning your analysis. I'm questioning the timing. We get actionable intel on a high-value target the same week the IG starts asking questions about missing money? That's not coincidence. That's misdirection." Elena had bristled. She'd spent 3 weeks building this case, correlating signals intelligence with human reports, creating a target package that was, on paper, airtight. Having a senior NCO question it in front of the team felt like a challenge to her competence. "We have our orders, Sergeant. Movement in 6 hours." Caldwell had held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Now, lying in the riverbed with blood in her mouth, Elena would have given anything to take those words back. She found the downed helicopter 40 minutes later. The Black Hawk had pancaked into the valley floor, rotors sheared off, fuselage crumpled like a beer can. This was the QRF bird, the quick reaction force that had tried to extract them after the ambush. Surface-to-air missile had caught it clean. No survivors. But survivors weren't what Elena needed. She pried open the crew chief's door and started searching. Standard loadout for a medevac bird. Trauma kits, IV bags, morphine. She found 2 auto-injectors and didn't hesitate. The burn of the drug hit her system like liquid fire, pushing back the pain just enough to think clearly. Next, the leg. She cut away her pant leg with a knife. The knee was wrong, bent at an angle that made her stomach turn. Dislocated, not broken. Small miracles. She braced her back against the helicopter frame, gripped her thigh with both hands, and pulled. The pop was audible. So was her scream. She stuffed her sleeve in her mouth and rode out the wave of agony, vision tunneling to black. When it cleared, the leg was straight again. Still couldn't feel her toes, but the joint was aligned. She wrapped it with an ACE bandage from the trauma kit, tight enough to stabilize, loose enough not to cut off circulation entirely. Then she found the tablet. It was still strapped to the co-pilot's kneeboard, a military-grade tablet running the Blue Force tracker system. Every friendly unit's position displayed in real time, except the battery was nearly dead, screen flickering. Elena powered it up, squinting at the display. There, her convoy's last known position, marked with blue icons. Timestamp, 2,247 hours. She watched the replay, tracking their movement through the valley. Standard patrol route, nothing unusual. Then, at 22:45 hours, 2 minutes before the ambush, something changed. The blue icons turned red. Elena stared at the screen, not understanding. Red icons meant hostile forces, enemy positions. But these were her trucks, her people. She backed up the timeline, watching it again, and again. At exactly 22:45:33 hours, someone with command-level access had manually redesignated Alpha Company's convoy as enemy combatants. In the system, in the database that fed targeting information to every drone, every artillery battery, every close air support mission in the theater. They'd been marked for death by their own side. The tablet's screen went dark, battery dead, but Elena had seen enough. She sat there in the wreckage, morphine dulling the edges of her thoughts, and tried to process what this meant. The ambush wasn't Taliban. Or rather, it wasn't just Taliban. Someone wearing an American uniform had set them up, had changed their designation in the system, then probably fed the coordinates to local fighters. Let them do the dirty work. And when the QRF launched to help, that same someone had made sure surface-to-air missiles were waiting. This was murder. Premeditated, coordinated. But why? The temperature was dropping. Elena could see her breath now, white puffs of vapor in the darkness. The wind had shifted, coming down from the peaks of the Hindu Kush. It carried the smell of snow. She'd been in Afghanistan long enough to know what that meant. Blizzard conditions within hours. The Korengal Valley would become a white tomb. No air support, no resupply. Anyone caught in the open would die of exposure before they made it 5 miles, including her. She inventoried what she had, the AK-47 with 14 rounds, 3 magazines for her M4, wherever it was, 1 grenade, the knife, morphine, 1 injector left, protein bars from the helicopter, crushed but edible. No cold weather gear. Her tactical jacket was shredded from the blast. No radio. The helicopter's comms were fried. She was 20 miles from the nearest American outpost, with a bad leg, in the middle of a valley crawling with enemy fighters who knew she was alive. The smart play was to hide. Find a cave, wait out the storm, try to signal a passing patrol. But Elena couldn't stop thinking about the tablet, about those blue icons turning red, about Caldwell's warning that she'd ignored. Someone had killed her entire unit to cover something up, and that someone was still out there, probably celebrating a successful op, probably filing reports about a tragic ambush, probably getting ready to do it again to the next intelligence officer who got too close to the truth. The wind picked up, carrying the first snowflakes. Elena pushed herself to her feet, testing the leg. It held, barely. The morphine was doing its job. She had maybe 4 hours before the pain came back hard enough to cripple her. 4 hours to find shelter, to plan, to decide whether she was going to run or fight. She found a rocky overhang half a mile from the crash site. Not a cave, just a depression in the cliff face, deep enough to hide from aerial observation. She scraped away the snow and settled in, back against stone that still held the day's heat. Then she heard his voice. "You look like hell, Captain." Elena's head snapped up. Master Sergeant Caldwell stood at the edge of the overhang, arms crossed, that familiar half-smirk on his face. He wore his full kit, vest, helmet, rifle. No blood, no wounds, not real, couldn't be real. "You're dead," Elena whispered. "Yeah," Caldwell nodded. "Been trying to tell you that for the last hour. You keep ignoring me." "This is the morphine, hallucination, stress response." "Sure." He crouched down, close enough that she should have been able to smell him. Gun oil and Copenhagen dip, and that awful energy drink he lived on. But there was nothing, just the wind. Or maybe you're finally listening to the part of your brain that knew I was right, that this whole op stank from the start. Elena closed her eyes, opened them. He was still there. "What do I do?" Her voice cracked. "You already know." Caldwell's expression turned serious. "You've got two choices, run or fight. Running means you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering when they'll tie up that loose end. Fighting means you probably die in the next 24 hours, but at least you die making them pay for it." "I can't fight." Elena gestured at her leg, at the empty magazines. "I'm one person, injured, no support." "You're a captain in the United States Army," Caldwell stood. "You're an intelligence officer who just uncovered evidence of a command-level conspiracy, and you're alive when you shouldn't be. That makes you the most dangerous weapon in this valley." The wind howled. Snow was falling harder now. "They think you're dead or running," Caldwell continued. "They're not expecting you to go on the offense. Use that." "Go on offense with what? I don't even know who did this." "Then find out." He started to fade, becoming translucent. "You've got 4 hours before the morphine wears off. Make them count." Elena blinked. She was alone again. But the AK-47 felt heavier in her hands. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a plan was forming. Crazy, probably suicidal, but it beat dying in a cave. She checked the rifle's action, chambered around, and started moving deeper into the valley, toward the Taliban checkpoint she'd identified on yesterday's patrol map, the one with the long-range radio equipment. If someone in her chain of command had sold them out, Elena needed to know who, and the only way to find out was to make them think she was still a threat. Make them come for her. Draw them into the open. The snow was ankle-deep now, temperature plummeting. Elena's breath came in ragged gasps as she forced her injured leg to keep moving. One step, another. The morphine was wearing off faster than she'd expected, pain creeping back like acid in her joints. She had maybe 2 hours left, 2 hours before her body gave out entirely, 2 hours to start a war. The Taliban checkpoint sat in a natural choke point, a narrow pass between two cliff faces where the valley road bottlenecked to single-lane width. Elena observed it from 300 meters out, prone behind a rock shelf, snow accumulating on her back. 4 fighters visible, probably 6 total. They had a technical, a Toyota Hilux with a Russian DSHK heavy machine gun mounted in the bed, the kind of weapon that could cut a Humvee in half. Sandbag positions flanking the road. A small compound behind the checkpoint, smoke rising from a chimney. And there, mounted on the compound's roof, the prize. A long-range radio antenna, the type that could reach Kandahar or even Kabul. Military-grade equipment, probably captured from Afghan National Army. That radio was her target. But getting to it meant going through 6 armed men in a fortified position while injured, outnumbered, and running on morphine fumes. The rational part of Elena's brain, the intelligence officer part, was screaming that this was suicide. The other part, the part that sounded like Caldwell, was doing the math differently. Surprise, darkness, their overconfidence, the fact that they thought all the Americans in the valley were dead. These weren't advantages exactly, but they were something. Leverage points. She just had to use them right. Elena checked her ammunition again. 14 rounds in the AK. 1 grenade. The knife. Against 6 men with automatic weapons and a heavy machine gun. Not enough firepower to fight, but maybe enough to cause chaos. She started planning. The blizzard was her ally now. Visibility down to 20 meters. The fighters at the checkpoint had pulled back under a tarp shelter, huddling around a small fire. Only 1 sentry remained outside, and he was more focused on staying warm than watching the approach. Elena circled wide, using the terrain. Her leg was screaming now, morphine completely worn off. Every step sent lightning bolts of agony up her spine. She bit down on her sleeve again, forcing herself to keep moving. 50 meters. 40. The sentry coughed, stamped his feet. His AK was slung across his back, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. 30 meters. Elena pulled the grenade from her vest. Soviet-era F1, the kind the Taliban loved because they were reliable and deadly. 4-second fuse, lethal radius of 10 meters. She pulled the pin, counted 1, Mississippi, then threw. The grenade arced through the falling snow, bounced once off the technical's hood, and rolled under the tarp shelter. Someone shouted. The world turned white. The explosion was massive, amplified by the confined space under the tarp. Bodies flew. The technical's windows shattered. The heavy machine gun barrel tilted skyward, mount damaged. Elena was already moving, sprinting through the smoke and confusion. The sentry spun toward the blast, finally bringing his rifle up, but Elena was on him. She drove the knife into his throat, angling down toward the heart. He collapsed, gurgling. She grabbed his AK, fresh magazine, 30 rounds, and kept running toward the compound. Gunfire erupted behind her, wild, panicked. They couldn't see her in the storm. She reached the compound door and kicked it open, rolling inside. Empty. Or mostly empty. 1 man at the radio desk, headphones on, frozen in shock. Elena shot him twice, center mass, the way she'd been trained. He slumped forward, blood pooling on the radio controls. She was inside. She had the radio, but now came the hard part. Staying alive long enough to use it. Bullets punched through the compound walls, thin plywood and mud brick, no real protection. Elena dropped flat, crawling toward the radio station. Outside, she could hear them organizing, shouting orders. They'd regroup fast. She had maybe 90 seconds. The radio was old Soviet gear, but Elena had trained on similar systems. She flipped switches, adjusted frequencies, listening to the static. There, American comms traffic, encrypted, but she recognized the cadence. This was the main military network for Regional Command East. She keyed the mic, then stopped. If she called for help, who would answer? Someone in her chain of command had marked her unit for death. That same someone had access to communications. If she broadcast her position, she might be calling in her own execution. But if she didn't call anyone, she'd die here when the Taliban stormed the compound. Rock. Hard place. Then Elena remembered the tablet, the timestamp, the exact moment someone had changed their status from friendly to hostile. If she could figure out who had command access at that specific time, she'd know who to avoid. But that required getting out of here alive. Bullets continued to shred the walls. A voice outside, closer now, coordinating an assault. Elena ejected her magazine, checked the count. 26 rounds left. Not enough for a sustained firefight. She looked around the compound. Radio equipment. Ammunition crates in the corner. A map table with scattered papers. And there, a window facing the cliffside, away from the checkpoint. An escape route. Maybe. Elena grabbed a notebook from the radio desk, stuffing it into her jacket. Intelligence was intelligence, even handwritten Taliban notes. Then she moved to the ammunition crates, checking contents. 7.62 millimeter rounds for the AKs, RPG warheads, and, jackpot, 2 more F1 grenades. She pocketed both, then smashed the radio with her rifle butt. If she couldn't use it, neither could they. The assault came 30 seconds later. They breached the front door with a burst of automatic fire, 3 fighters rushing in while 2 provided covering fire from outside. Standard small unit tactics. Elena was already at the window, firing controlled bursts. She hit the first man in the doorway, saw him spin and fall. The second dove for cover behind the map table. She dropped a grenade at her feet, pulled the pin, and dove through the window. The explosion behind her was deafening. The compound's roof partially collapsed, but Elena was rolling through snow, leg erupting in fresh agony, scrambling for the cliff face. She found a crevice, barely wide enough for her body, and wedged herself inside. Above her, the sounds of chaos. Men shouting, someone screaming in pain, the Technical's engine roaring to life. They'd be searching for her soon. But in this storm, in this terrain, she had a chance. Elena checked herself. Still had the AK, both grenades used, the notebook from the radio station, and approximately 0 working body parts that didn't hurt. But she was alive. And now she had something she didn't have before. Evidence. Whatever was in that notebook, it might give her leverage. Might tell her who these fighters were working with. The snow fell harder. Elena's teeth chattered. Hypothermia was setting in for real now. She needed shelter, warmth, medical attention. What she had was a hole in a cliff and the memory of Caldwell's voice telling her to fight. So she'd fight. But first, she needed to understand what she was fighting against. Elena waited in the crevice until the sounds of searching faded. 2 hours, maybe 3. Time became fluid when you were freezing to death. When she finally emerged, the world was white silence. The blizzard had intensified, visibility down to 10 feet. The Taliban had given up the search. Smart move in these conditions. Even trained soldiers didn't hunt in whiteout storms. She limped away from the checkpoint, moving north along the cliff face. Every step was negotiated agony. The knee had swollen to twice its normal size. Her hands were losing feeling, despite the gloves she'd taken from the dead sentry. She needed to read the notebook, but her fingers were too numb to turn pages. Find shelter first, intel second. A mile up the valley, she found a shepherd's hut, abandoned for the winter, half buried in snow. The door hung crooked on leather hinges. Inside, dirt floor, stone walls, a fire pit with old ashes. No windows. Perfect. Elena used the last of her matches to start a fire with debris from a broken wooden stool. The flames caught, weak but growing. She positioned herself close enough to feel the heat without setting her torn jacket alight. Then she pulled out the notebook. It was a standard composition book, the kind sold in Pakistani bazaars. The pages were covered in neat Pashto script, numbers, names, grid coordinates. But Elena's language training was basic. She could make out maybe 1 word in 5. She flipped through, looking for anything recognizable. English words, American military terminology. There, page 14. A list of dates and times, written in English. Radio frequencies and call signs, American call signs, Alpha 1 through Alpha 6. Her convoy. Next to each call sign, a name, an American name. And next to 3 of those names, a single word in English. Paid. Elena's blood went cold despite the fire. She studied the names. Corporal Martinez, their driver, Specialist Kim, comms tech, and Sergeant Okonkwo, their medic. 3 members of her own unit had been on someone's payroll. But that didn't make sense. All 3 were dead. She'd seen their bodies in the wreckage. Why would the Taliban pay people and then kill them in the ambush? Unless the payment wasn't from the Taliban. Unless someone else had been running those 3 soldiers, using them to feed information. And when the investigation into the missing SERP funds got too close, that same someone had decided to eliminate all the witnesses at once. Make it look like a Taliban ambush. Clean. Surgical. Elena turned the page. More names, these ones she didn't recognize. Afghan names, probably local informants. But at the bottom of the list, one name stood out. Major Vance, her battalion operations officer. Next to his name, a dollar amount, 50,000, and a date, 3 days ago. Elena stared at the number, mind racing. Vance had been the one who'd approved the mission, who'd reassured the company commander that the intelligence was solid, who'd signed the movement order that sent them into the valley. And now his name was in a Taliban notebook associated with a payment large enough to buy a house. She needed to get this information out, upload it, send it to someone she could trust. But who could she trust? If a field-grade officer was compromised, how deep did this go? The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled. Elena's hands were shaking, and not just from the cold. She must have dozed off, because when her eyes snapped open, the fire had burned down to embers, and someone was standing in the doorway. Not Caldwell this time. Real. Solid. Backlit by the gray dawn light filtering through the blizzard. Elena's hand went to the AK, but her frozen fingers fumbled the grip. The figure moved fast, kicked the rifle away, dropped a knee into her chest, pinning her. A face swam into focus. Hard features. Ice blue eyes. Beard dusted with snow. American. "Don't move," he said, Texas accent. "I've got a 9mm pointed at your head, and I really don't want to explain why I shot a U.S. Army captain in a shepherd's hut." Elena froze. "Who are you?" "Someone trying to figure out if you're the problem or the solution." He eased back slightly, gun still trained on her. "Name's Garrett, Chief Warrant Officer, 160, SOAR. And you're Captain Elena Mercer, supposedly KIA as of 22 hours ago." "I got better." "I can see that." Garrett's eyes flicked to her swollen knee, the dried blood on her jacket, the improvised bandaging. "You look like you went 10 rounds with an IED and lost." "What are you doing here?" "My bird got shot down trying to pull your convoy out. Lost my entire crew. Been holed up in these mountains for 18 hours watching Taliban patrols and wondering why nobody's launching a SAR mission." He studied her face. "Then I intercepted radio chatter about an American woman killing 6 fighters at a checkpoint. Figured I'd investigate." Elena's mind calculated angles. Garrett could be legitimate. The 161st Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers, had been running support missions in the valley. Or he could be part of the conspiracy, sent to finish what the ambush started. "You got any proof you are who you say you are?" she asked. Garrett reached slowly into his jacket, pulled out a CAC card. Common Access Card, military ID. The hologram looked right. The photo matched his face. "Now you," he said. Elena pulled her own CAC from her vest pocket, handed it over. Garrett examined it, then looked at her with new respect. "Field Intelligence Officer, You were the one who built the target package for this clusterfuck? Yeah, Elena met his gaze. I also found evidence that someone in our chain of command set us up to die. Garrett went very still. Explain. She told him everything. The tablet, the blue icons turning red, the notebook with Major Vance's name, the 3 soldiers who'd been paid off. When she finished, Garrett sat back, lowering his pistol. Christ, he muttered. I knew something was wrong with this mission. The timing was too tight, the intel too perfect, but I thought it was just the usual foobar. He looked at the notebook in Elena's hands. Can I see that? She hesitated, then passed it over. Garrett flipped through the pages, his expression darkening. I know some of these names. Afghan contractors who work on base. Interpreters. That guy there, he pointed to a name. He's a janitor in the TOC, has access to everything. The Tactical Operations Center? Yeah, which means if Vance wanted to feed information to the Taliban, he had a direct pipeline. Garrett closed the notebook. Question is, what was he hiding that was worth killing 23 Americans? The SERP investigation, Elena said. Commander's Emergency Response Program. Someone's been skimming funds. Caldwell figured it out, started asking questions. I think Vance realized we were getting close. So he manufactured a mission, fed the Taliban your route, and made sure nobody survived to testify. Garrett's jaw tightened. That's not just corruption, that's treason. And murder. And murder. He stood, moved to the doorway, scanning the terrain. We need to get this to JAG, or CID, someone outside the battalion who can investigate. How? Elena gestured at the storm. We're 20 miles from base, on foot, in blizzard conditions. And if we try to call it in, Vance monitors all traffic through the TOC. Garrett was quiet for a moment. Then, there's another option. Fob, Michigan. Small Special Forces outpost, 15 clicks northeast. Different chain of command. They've got satellite comms that don't route through our TOC. Can you make it that far? Elena looked at his left arm, noticing for the first time the makeshift bandage, the blood seeping through. Can you? He countered. Fair point. We move at night, Garrett said. Stay off the main valleys. The storm should break by nightfall. We'll have maybe 6 hours of clear weather before the next system moves in. And if we run into Taliban patrols? Garrett checked his pistol, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a second one. He handed it to Elena. Then we make sure they don't run into anyone after us. They waited until dusk, conserving energy, trading stories. Garrett had been flying for 12 years. Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan twice. He had a wife in Savannah, 2 kids he hadn't seen in 8 months. His co-pilot had been 23 years old, fresh out of flight school. Kid wanted to be an astronaut, Garrett said, staring into the fire. Figured flying helicopters was good training. Now he's in a body bag somewhere, if they even recovered the bodies. Elena told him about Caldwell, about ignoring the warning, about the weight of 23 deaths that she carried. Not your fault, Garrett said. You built the package with the information you had. Someone else poisoned the well. Doesn't make them less dead. No, but it makes you the person who can get them justice. The words settled between them like a promise. When full dark came, they moved out. Garrett took point, using a handheld GPS unit he'd salvaged from his bird. Elena followed, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. The pistol Garrett had given her felt heavy on her hip. The storm had cleared, leaving a landscape of pristine white under a sky full of stars. Beautiful and deadly. The temperature had dropped to maybe 10 degrees. Elena's breath crystallized in the air. They'd covered maybe 2 clicks when Garrett's fist went up. Stop! Elena froze, listening. Voices. Ahead and to the right, speaking Pashto. Garrett pointed to a cluster of rocks, gestured for Elena to take cover. She moved as quietly as her injured leg allowed, dropping behind cover. Through a gap in the rocks, she could see them. 4 Taliban fighters, spread out in a search line, sweeping the valley. They had night vision, American night vision, probably captured gear. And they were methodical, checking every shadow, every depression in the snow, looking for survivors. Garrett appeared beside her, silent as smoke. He pointed to himself, then to the left flank of the patrol, pointed to Elena, then to the right. A pincer movement. Elena shook her head. Too risky. 4 against 2, and she could barely walk. But Garrett was already moving, a shadow among shadows. And Elena realized he was right. If they let this patrol pass, they'd report back. More patrols would come. The window for reaching FOB Michigan would close. Better to fight now, on their terms. She worked her way right, using the rocks for cover. Her knee screamed with every movement, but she gritted her teeth and kept going. 30 meters. 20. The nearest fighter was young, maybe 18. His NVGs were old generation, probably Russian. He swept his AK across the terrain, methodical but bored. This was routine for him. Just another night patrol in the endless war. Elena aimed for center mass, controlled breathing, finger on the trigger. Garrett's pistol cracked twice, suppressed but still audible. The fighter on the far left dropped. The other 3 spun, confused, trying to locate the threat. Elena took her shot. The young fighter jerked, stumbled, fell. The remaining 2 opened fire, wild sprays that kicked up snow. Elena rolled left as rounds chewed through the rocks she'd been hiding behind. She came up shooting, double tap, the way she'd been trained. 1 man down. The last fighter ran. Garrett appeared from nowhere, moving fast. He tackled the runner from behind, drove him face first into the snow. There was a brief struggle, then silence. Garrett stood, wiping his knife on the dead man's jacket. 4 down, he said quietly, but their squad leader will expect a radio check within the hour. We need to move. They stripped the bodies of anything useful, magazines, grenades, a thermal blanket. Elena took the young fighter's NVGs, slipping them over her head. The world turned green-white. Garrett checked his GPS. 10 clicks to go. We make good time, we're there by 0300. And if we run into more patrols, then we don't leave witnesses. They pushed hard for the next 3 hours, stopping only when Elena's leg gave out completely. Garrett fashioned a splint from tree branches in paracord, wrapping it tight enough to stabilize the joint. This'll get you another few clicks, he said, but you're gonna need a surgeon. Add it to the list. At midnight, they stopped in a drainage ditch to rest. Elena checked the notebook again, memorizing the key details. If something happened to her, Garrett needed to know what to report. That's when she saw it. A page she'd missed before stuck to another page with dried blood. More names, more payments. But these weren't soldiers. These were contractors, supply chain personnel, and at the bottom of the list, Colonel Briggs, the brigade commander. Elena's hands started shaking again. Garrett, look at this. He studied the page, his expression going stone cold. Jesus Christ, this goes all the way to brigade? Higher, maybe. Elena flipped through more pages. Look at these payment amounts. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. This isn't just skimming SERP funds. This is something bigger. Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then, you know what this means, right? If the brigade commander is compromised, everyone below him could be. We can't trust anyone in the conventional chain of command. FOB Michigan is run by Green Berets who report to SOCOM, not brigade. Different funding stream, different oversight. He tapped the notebook. This is why we're going there. They're the only ones we can trust. A sound in the distance. Helicopter rotors. They both froze, listening. The sound grew louder, coming from the south. Elena raised her NVGs, scanning the sky. There, a Black Hawk, running with lights off, flying nap of the earth. Combat approach. That's a search bird, Garrett said. They're looking for us. Rescue? Or cleanup crew? He grabbed Elena's arm. We need to hide, now. They scrambled into a culvert, pressing themselves into the frozen mud as the helicopter passed overhead. Thermal imaging would pick them up if the pilots were looking. But the bird kept going, searching the wrong valley. When the sound faded, Garrett let out a breath. They're not coordinating with TOC. That's a good sign. Or it means Vance has his own assets. Either way, we're running out of time. He checked his GPS again. 5